Hi, this is Andrew Jacobs, Berkshire Hathaway Fox & Roach and the Jacobs team, and today we are talking about a first-time homebuyer checklist and 7 steps that you shouldn't miss. First, I think it's really important to start thinking about a pre-approval. So a pre-approval is a letter you're going to get from a mortgage company, any reputable licensed lender. And they're going to sit and talk with you either on the phone or in person about your credit, your assets, and income. And once they run all of that, they're going to know exactly where you fit as far as purchasing power. And that's really important to know. And you're also going to discuss your closing costs. What does my cash to close look like? How much money do I need to really close on a new home? And as a first-time buyer, you've never been through the process before. Even if you have been through the process before, it has certainly changed since when you bought. So I think it's really important to dive into the numbers right away so that when we go out looking for homes, you're not exceeding your budget, you're not falling in love with a home that you can't afford. So a mortgage pre-approval is a great first step. Next, we want to talk about budget. Now, some people think the pre-approval is the budget, but it's not. It's a whole different subject. So imagine you're out looking at homes, you're pre-approved for $400,000, and we're touring properties in that price range. Well, budget has to do with, is the home renovated? Does it need a new roof? Does it need a new hot water heater? HVAC? Are there some plumbing issues, electrical issues? Does it need a new panel? Is there an oil tank in the ground? There's so many things that we think about when purchasing a home, and budget is what I'm talking about here. So, okay, you can purchase a home for $400,000, but what if it needs $40,000 of improvements? Do you have that in your budget? And if not, do we need to maybe up the price point for a home that's more renovated where it can be more turnkey? Or are you open to a lower price home but maybe making these improvements over time? Now, the thing is, if you're getting a mortgage, which a lot of buyers do, that's a monthly payment situation. So we're talking about where are you comfortable from a monthly payment standpoint. If you purchase a home for less, that's great, but the improvements that you'll make will have to be made with cash. And so that is a whole different conversation. Do you have all this extra cash on hand? You can't mortgage that. You can't take a loan out for a 30-year period. So that is the difference between budgeting and pre-approvals. Next, we want to think about inspections. I always send our buyers a nice list of reputable home inspectors locally who have been inspecting homes in the area for a long time. And I always like to ask the inspectors, how many inspections have you done? 10,000 is a very good career. I even have a couple of inspectors I like that have done 15,000 inspections in their career. They are not going to get surprised too often about what they find, and that's what you want. Also, there's this new wave of having the home inspector go without anybody there, and then the home inspector calls the buyer after to talk about the property, or they'll just send a written report. That is not helpful, in my opinion. I want to be there, I want the buyers to be there, and we spend 2 or 3 hours at the property. What a great way to really get to know every inch of that place. And also, if we have to negotiate, I know what I'm talking about. I was there, I saw the problems in person. Inspections are crucial, and I always say it's my favorite day of the transaction because we don't really know what we have until we inspect it. Another topic we want to really make sure you understand are closing costs. So sometimes you talk to the mortgage company, you figure out how much your down payment is going to be, but there are also closing costs when you purchase a home. And depending on what state, and we're licensed in Pennsylvania and New Jersey, they're different. So in Pennsylvania, for example, in our area, you have a 1% transfer tax. So that's part of your closing costs on top of your down payment. So down payment isn't everything. We have transfer tax. You have prepaid taxes, you have title insurance, you have title searching, you might have mortgage costs like an origination fee, an appraisal fee. So there's a lot that goes into purchasing a home, and I think sometimes people don't think about the closing costs on top of the down payment. It's really important to talk numbers. And it might be boring and you might not be a finance person, but at the end of the day, when you know your numbers, you can go get a home that's perfect for you. And for the buyers that are not prepared, that don't do this legwork, they get a little surprised later, and sometimes they can't go get the home they love. So I know how important this is ahead of time. Next, we want to talk about timelines. Once you get in contract, we have to follow the timeline all the way until closing. And for some contingencies, there's deadlines. So you have to get your inspections done in a certain amount of time. You have to have your mortgage applied for. You have to lock your interest rate. We have to do title searching. So we handle a lot of this for our clients, but you should know that. You should know the timelines too. So we try to put a list together. We try to make sure we're following them. The worst thing that can happen is a buyer that's going through a process, maybe without a realtor or with a realtor that's less experienced, and they miss a date, you basically waive that right when you miss the date. Now, in New Jersey, the dates can be a little more flexible. In Pennsylvania, not as much at all. So it's very important that we follow the contract and that we hit all of our milestones within the allotted timeline. Let's talk about a next important step, which is contingencies. So a contingency basically means it is subject to X. So if you're making an offer to buy a home, what is it subject to? First, we would say certainly an inspection. You might say this purchase is contingent upon or subject to a successful home inspection. You must get your mortgage, and if for some reason you can't get your mortgage or you lose your job before closing or something like that happens, you need the ability to cancel and get your deposit back. And these are rights afforded to buyers in both states, Pennsylvania and New Jersey. So that is what a contingency is. Now, the question becomes, if we go after a popular property, how can I position you so you can win that property while also keeping some rights and contingencies to make sure that we go through some sort of checklist before you purchase the home. So there's a give and take when you're making a deal with a seller. Okay, well, I will get rid of this contingency. It's not subject to this, but this is really important to me. And so these are all of the factors we think about when putting an offer together and making sure that you're well protected. But if you're going after a popular, beautiful home, we need to also look competitive. So these are really important considerations when you're purchasing your first home especially. As a first-time buyer, the last thing I'll talk about is a final walkthrough. So when you're purchasing a home, some people will do this final walkthrough the night before closing, and that never made any sense to me. Why would I walk through the night before closing? What if there's a flood that evening later, and then I buy the house the next morning? So a final walkthrough should happen, all things considered, 1 hour before the closing. And so that's what we do. We will show up at the house 1 hour before, maybe half an hour before, as close to that closing as possible, and walk through it. And during that final walkthrough, we're testing all the appliances, we're running the heat or air conditioning depending on the season, and we're making sure that there's no new damage from when the seller moved out, if that's the situation there. So final walkthrough should take 20-30 minutes perhaps, and we're making sure the home looks exactly the way we remember it and that the seller maintained it per the contract. And if everything looks good, circle the outside of the property, and this home looks like the one you should be buying, the one you thought you were buying, then we will head to the closing and buy the home. So that's a final walkthrough. And this has been a list of things you should think about as a first-time buyer.